What's up, everybody? So I've been thinking about making some short videos to kind of summarize some podcasts that I think are really helpful, have great information in them, but maybe are a little long or a little dense for some people. And so I'm finally doing that. I decided to start with Huberman Lab episode number 47, which is about gratitude. I was trying to get it out yesterday for Thanksgiving, but spending time with family took precedence, which is awesome. But now I'm getting to it now. So Dr. Huberman is a neurobiologist and ophthalmologist at Stanford School of Medicine, and he does a wonderful podcast called the Huberman Lab, where he discusses scientifically based tools and practices and all kinds of things that can just be helpful to living a better life, from sleep to exercise to gratitude, all kinds of things. I would highly recommend scrolling through some of the episodes and seeing if any of the names jump out at you, because there's just wonderful information in there. So this is number 47 about gratitude, like I said. And in the past, much like Dr. Huberman, when I've heard about gratitude practices, I've heard about a certain kind of protocol that I've practiced over the years that's taking some time to write down or mentally make a list of things that you're grateful for, and then just spending some time basically leaning into that feeling of gratitude, really appreciating those things. I do think personally that this is a positive practice. I think that spending some time appreciating the positive things in your life and focusing on those instead of the negative things and trying to do that regularly is just generally good for you, good for your mindset and that kind of thing. Just to be aware of what you're focusing on. However, the scientific literature laid out in this podcast really point to a different type of protocol for getting the most out of a gratitude practice, which I found very interesting. I was surprised to learn that there have been many studies on the practice of gratitude and the activation of the circuits in the brain associated with gratitude. It's been shown to help with trauma from the past, to inoculate us from future trauma and to deal with that better. It can improve social relationships, not just the ones that we are focusing on in the gratitude practice, but all of our social relationships. It can also be a really potent force to increase empathy as well as motivation. In a recent study, subjects who engaged in regular gratitude practice showed reductions in amygdala activity, which the amygdala is the part of the brain that's involved in fear and threat detection. And they also showed reductions in TNF alpha and IL-6, which are inflammatory cytokines, which are a part of our immune system. They're very helpful in the short term to deal with invaders and that kind of thing if we need to fight something off. But if their levels stay elevated for too long, they can cause problems such as chronic inflammation, things like that. These effects on those markers were shown to be very significant and to happen quickly, almost immediately after gratitude practice. The effects of these practices have also been shown to have a similar magnitude of effect as pharmacology or high-intensity interval training, which are both considered to be very potent forms of intervention. These kinds of practices are sometimes referred to as prosocial behaviors. So prosocial behaviors are activities or mindsets that make us more effective in interactions with others and as well as with ourselves. Prosocial circuits in the brain are generally associated with the neuromodulator serotonin and are opposite of defensive behavior circuits. Prosocial circuits are designed to bring us closer to things. When these circuits are active, they reduce the activity of the circuits in the brain for defensive behaviors, which is good. It's good to know that. Our defensive circuits have kind of a stronger influence on us since avoidance behaviors can be so necessary for survival. Gratitude practices can help balance those scales, and they can even make us lean towards the prosocial circuits and kind of predispose us to more happiness, really. It turns out that giving gratitude, though, isn't nearly as effective as receiving gratitude. A study was done where coworkers, unbeknownst to each other, wrote letters of gratitude to one another, and then they did neural imaging on them while they read the letters to each other aloud. And receiving that gratitude had a huge effect on these prosocial or gratitude circuits. The same circuits were actually shown to be activated in another study when people heard narratives about other people experiencing positive things in their life. So in this study, they were exposed to stories of people who had survived genocide and were directly helped by another person. This structured narrative actually is really important. Our brain is kind of wired to relate to narrative. We have a thing called theory of mind, which is basically our ability to put ourselves in somebody else's shoes, to understand and model in our mind what someone else is thinking. So yeah, it's really interesting. We also have been shown in another study, they showed that when different people were shown that it listened to the same story at different times in different places, not with each other, but just separately listened to the same story, there's a stereotyped response in their heart rate. So when they monitored their heart rate and physiological data from them as they listened to this story, over the course of the story, people had, when they mapped the heart rates over each other, they were almost identical. So when people are relating to a story and putting themselves in that frame of mind, there's a regular response to that in our physiology, meaning we can kind of recall a state of being. So the idea for this would be to put ourselves in a mindset of receiving gratitude, or listen to a story where we can relate to someone who is receiving gratitude. So the protocol for this would be to choose a memory of a time that you were receiving genuine gratitude for someone. It matters that it's genuine. But so putting yourself back into a memory, or recalling a story that you've heard probably in its entirety at least once, but then you could make bullet points of these, of just the outline of the story, and go over that a few times so that it's ingrained, so that you can kind of put yourself into that moment, that memory, or really recall that story well. And then just to experience that regularly for 1 to 5 minutes, just to put yourself in that space of receiving gratitude. And so even just practicing that, a few moments at a time while you're washing the dishes or walking to the car or whatever, just short practices can really make a huge difference on these prosocial circuits in our brain. And using the same story over and over again will actually ingrain those circuits. It will strengthen those pathways in your brain, so it becomes easier and easier to get yourself into that state. Again, this has really significant effects on relationships, on the fear and center of the brain, on motivation, on inflammation, really, really strong effects. And, it's very simple to do. You don't have to do it too often. In the podcast, he recommends 3 times a week. But it could be more, it could be less, it doesn't matter. It also helps with brain-heart synchronization, which if you want to know more about that, you can go to the podcast. Again, it's Huberman Lab podcast, episode 47. And he also talks at the end of the podcast about some pharmacological supplements and that kind of thing that can help increase serotonin and things like that. They're completely not necessary for this type of practice, but some people find that they enhance it. And I would like to add also something that wasn't in the podcast, but I think a way that we could really help with other people, in our life, is to show them gratitude very directly, give people these experiences and memories to go back to, and help build out a structure of memories that someone could choose from. We can easily do that for each other. Just when you're grateful for someone, let them know. And then find a memory where you felt really appreciated, or a story that really moved you of someone who was helped or felt appreciated, and spend some time in that regularly. And I was amazed at the effects that they found and how robust they were. I really highly recommend going and watching this episode if you're interested in more detail. He goes into the studies and who did them and how they did them and what the exact outcomes were. I think that it's really worth your time if you have, an hour and a half to spend on it. Anyway, hopefully I'll be doing more of these soon, and I hope this finds you well, and I am grateful for you who are watching.